and vision and possibility. And last week I started talking about paradigms, so I'm going to continue that conversation today. Another paradigm of peace. Last week we had a paradigm of peace. Today we have another paradigm of peace. And I realize there's lots of paradigms that are shifting for people, right? So I want to bring us back to the one from last week, because some of you didn't hear it, and it's absolutely my favorite thing. Do y'all know what a paradigm shift is? If you were here last week, you heard it. That it is a fundamental shift in the on our underlying assumptions of reality, like at the very ground level of things. And I shared one last week. It was so much fun, I have to share it again for those who weren't here. It was called The Great Horse Manure Crisis of 1894. And it was during a time in the 1890s in the big cities in New York and London and so on and so forth, where horses were the mode of transportation. And I'm not sure I knew this before doing all this research, but horses, it's a lot of excrement with horses, like 20 to 30 pounds worth, and a gallon of urine. And if you can imagine all the stuff that goes with that in cities, that people were saying by 1894 in London, they were saying in 50 years, every street in London will be buried in like 9 feet of manure. And it was such a big deal that in I think it was 98, they had an actual convention. They brought people together. It was going to be 10 days from all over the world to figure out what the heck they were going to do about this problem. And they gave up within 3 days. They said, there's nothing we can do about it. We're just going to all be knee-deep in doo-doo, like before long. And I love the metaphor because it feels kind of like that's where we are today, right? Like the stuff is getting deep. And so they threw up their hands and said, there's nothing we can do about it. They all went home, but we know that things changed. And the means of that change was already available. It was already available. But people did not they didn't take to this idea of transportation without horses. I mean, that was their thing. They couldn't envision a world without using the horse for transportation. What was going to happen with agriculture? And there were a bunch of reasons why they didn't want to go that route. But as we know, that's what happens, that the vehicle came just in time. And things didn't just get better. It's not like we made a better version of the horse, right? Or found ways to get rid of the excrement that were more conducive to life in that time. But it was a total radical shift of everything. You know, people had no idea that this could change in this way. They thought cars would be too expensive, and that traveling at speeds of 14 to 20 miles an hour, you know, there would be accidents like crazy. So yeah.
If I may interject.
Sure.
They thought that anything that went over 35 miles an hour would cause heart attacks.
Oh, yeah, did you hear that? People thought that anything that went over 35 miles an hour would cause heart attacks. How about that? So that is like a radical shift in how things were at a time that's really not that long ago. Now, these paradigm shifts, they happen within us too. It's not just great big huge societal things that happen. I had a paradigm shift myself years ago as I was coming into this teaching. So you see that it's personal, it's much bigger than us. But my paradigm shift was in being an empath. Does anybody know what that is? You know, like you feel other people's feelings. I know that people here tend to have that, right? We have it, like we feel people's stuff. You walk in a room and you kind of know what's going on without knowing what's going on. So I was a hospice social worker, and if my patients were sad, I would get pulled into their drama and their sadness. And if they were happy, it was a good day. And it was like I was continually being pulled here with this person's feelings and there with the other person's emotions, and just all over the place, and never feeling like I could hang on to myself. And my husband and I were going through a difficult time. He's still here, yes. But it was, you know, in 30 years, a lot of stuff happens, right? 30 years plus. So anyway, we were going through a tough time. We actually were separated for a little while. And I remember his mom calling me, supposedly to make me feel better. And we're having a conversation, and I don't know how long we talked, but at the end of that conversation, she says, "Wow, I feel so much better." And I remember being on the phone going, "You feel better?" Like, wow, I thought you were calling to make me feel better. And And then I could remember going into my parents' house and being different places and just kind of seeing the faces, like everybody was just waiting. Is she okay?
Yeah.
You know, is she going to be like sad? Is she going to be like, what do we need to do for her? And it was just so interesting to me to realize that I could walk in the door and it would shift the energy in the room. And suddenly I realized, wow, I'm not at everybody else's mercy. I actually could dictate how I feel, and not only for myself, but I could uplift a room when I walk in, right? And I'm just as quick, I could bring it down. But we all have that ability, we all have that capacity. And that was a turning point for me in my life in realizing that I had the power, that I didn't have to get pulled with everybody else's stuff, that I could do that. And had I not figured that out for myself, I wouldn't be able to do what I do today. There's no way that I could stand up here and have all these energies and all this stuff happen and hold my own in that if I hadn't figured that out. So it was a tremendous paradigm shift for me personally, and there have been many, many, many since then. But a total and radical change in your understanding of reality. Now, we're all going through stuff. We see it reflected nationally. We're seeing it in our communities. We're seeing it. I mean, I heard of several things going on this morning for people within our congregation, knowing that these shifts are happening. Change is coming fast and furious. Anybody else feeling it? Yeah. So what do we do with that? You know, we're at that point, the crossroads. We go through the same old thing or we change. And people don't like change. Is there anyone here that likes change? Yeah, I bet you had to train yourself to like change. Because for most of us, it is not easy. You see, faced with the choice between changing one's mind and proving that there is no need to do so, almost everyone gets busy on the proof. Right? For why we don't need to change anything. Let's say everything is good, just like it is. I mean, you know, the soda poop's getting a little higher and higher. It's all right. We'll find other places to put it. Change is difficult, but change is necessary. And this is what motivates us, right? We're motivated to change either because the pain becomes too great and we can no longer stay where we are, right? Or we get in touch with a larger vision that says, come this way. And you don't have to get the 2x4 upside the head, right? That says you're moving whether you want to or not.
Okay.
Things are changing whether you like it or not. I don't prefer that anymore. I listen to the signals as they're coming now, right? So that it's not quite as violent anymore when the change comes. You start to pay attention, you start looking. So allow yourself then to get pulled by the greater vision, right? Don't wait till the pain is so bad that you can't help but move. Allow yourselves to be pulled by the higher vision. That means you have to get in touch with that vision for yourself. And we all have it. All of us come in here with some purpose, something that we're here to do. Probably many things that we're here to do. But we need to get quiet enough to hear what that is, what that purpose is for us. So there's, as I said, lots of change going on, and there are lots of paradigms that I'm thinking no longer serve us. I know there are paradigms in here that I have been dealing with myself over the years, of understanding and being in the midst of this shift. And some of it I've been talking about already. I think they probably all, these ideas refer to all of us, I think. They're kind of universal in a way. The first problematic paradigm that we have is the idea, now this is a societal thing, I believe, that violence solves problems and that somehow it makes us safer. And I'm going to go through all of them, and then I'm going to just talk, kind of go into a little more depth about them. But the idea that violence solves problems and makes us safer, logically, it really doesn't make sense. But yet, it still exists. It still happens, and for many of us, it's still our go-to. Right? We get upset about something. It's the idea, I want to smack somebody down. Or if somebody cuts you off in traffic and you want to do something to them, like we have this thing inside of us, that it's time for this to shift because it's not serving us anymore. It probably never did, actually. Probably never did. But as we evolve, it becomes clearer and clearer, these things that no longer work for us. Another paradigm, that there's not enough, there's not enough of whatever. There's not enough money, there's not enough food, there's not enough time, there's not enough. We feel like there's scarcity. Anybody else feel that? You know, that this is a paradigm. This is something that we've all probably grown up with. The idea of not enough money, of not enough something. And then the corollary to that is that we then have to compete, or we have to make way for us to get what it is that we need. And that requires competition, or it requires force, or somehow me taking what I want to get what I need, because there isn't enough. Another paradigm, and this is the big one, I think, this feeling that we are all separate. That we are all separate individuals, that we are separate from the Creator, from Source, that we're separate from the planet somehow, that we're separate from other people, that what I do only matters for me, or maybe a few people in my immediate circle, but it has no ripple effect. You know, there are people who are sitting in depression and loneliness, sadness, feeling because they're just that isolated, like that they don't matter. And it's an untruth. It's a lie. It's a lie. It's a falsehood that we have believed for a long time, that we are all separate. And then the corollary to that, so we're all separate. I'm an individual human being, and we are all individuals, and some of us are better than others. Another major paradigm, another issue that we have culturally and within ourselves too, because it sets us up for feeling like, oh, I'm less than because those others are better than I am. Smarter, richer, thinner, whatever. Right? Can you all see this? Do you see how these paradigms have kind of molded our culture and even a lot of our own awareness and understanding of ourselves? Can you all see that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Time for a change. We're going from dysfunction, junction, to something else. A radical shift. Again, a radical shift. So back to the first one about violence. I think a lot of us believe that peace means that there is no longer conflict in our lives. And I don't believe that to be the case at all. Neither does the Dalai Lama. Peace doesn't mean an absence of conflict. Differences are always going to be there. It's part of what makes us grow. It's part of what expands us, right, is those differences. But peace means solving these differences through peaceful means, through dialogue, through education, through knowledge, and through humane ways. And that's what we've been talking about over the past month or so, is this idea of being the calm in the eye of the storm, where things may be swirling around you, right? But the idea of being at peace is to let that stuff swirl and hold on to who you are, know who you are. This quote comes from a person named Dominic Barter, who is one of the founding people in this movement we call restorative justice, restorative practices. And what he says about conflict is that conflict holds within it vital messages regarding unmet needs and areas of necessary change. Given this understanding, safety then is increased not by avoiding conflict, but by moving toward it with the intention of hearing the messages within. And so typically we deal with conflict in one of two ways. We're either going to force, right? Make our way happen via force, or we're going to avoid conflict because conflict looks dangerous and scary. Instead of looking at the conflict and saying, okay, what message is there in this conflict for me, for other people? What is it trying to tell me about what needs I have and what needs the other person has? And when we understand that, we can look for ways to meet those needs for ourselves and for the other in ways that don't involve force or violence. Would that be a paradigm shift? Yeah. Right? Imagine leaning into conflict instead of backing away from it. Like, let's actually dive in and look and see what is needed here. Here's another quote that I found, and I was going to share this one last week, but luckily I get to do it again, so I shared it this week because I didn't get to share it last week. But it was this: the further we move away from the communication of unmet need, the louder that communication needs to become to get our attention. So imagine you're in a room and you're trying to have conversation with somebody, they can't hear you. what do? You get louder, right? You talk louder. In other words, just as people tend to raise their volume in order to compensate for being further apart physically, they also tend to raise their volume to compensate for their perception that they are moving further apart in shared understanding, which we often are when there's conflict. So at its extreme, this volume raising looks like violence. And so you're not hearing what I'm trying to share with you. You're not understanding my need. I'm going to make sure that it gets louder and louder till you get it. And then we address it. Then the pain is so bad that we have to address it. Right? Is this what happens typically? Yeah. So this is the paradigm shift, right? This is one of the paradigm shifts. We talked about this one last week. Is the idea of leaning into conflict. Don't run from it. See what it has to offer you. Right? See what growth there is in it for everyone, so that we don't have to raise the volume so high. The other paradigm shift, as I talked about, us feeling like we are all alone, isolated, making no difference to anyone but our little circle of people and friends. This comes from Einstein. Now, this paradigm, we're in the midst of it right now. This is a thing that is shifting right now. Quantum physics has been a big piece of this. And quantum physics is now giving us proof from a scientific perspective of what the mystics have been saying all along, and the spiritual people, in that we are all deeply connected. We are all one, part of the same source, part of the same substance that is in everything, every living thing. And so Einstein said this: a human being is a part of a whole called by us the universe, a part that is limited in time and space. We experience ourselves, our thoughts, and our feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. I love that statement. An optical delusion of consciousness. In that we have our own consciousness, our own awareness. I can't be in Grady's brain or in Donna's mind, so it feels like we are all separate, but yet we are all partaking of the same greater mind, the same energy that runs in, around, and through all things. So this delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and affections for a few persons nearest to us. Our task then must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion, to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. We are all connected. What if we actually behaved that way? What if we all actually acted as if the things that I do in my life and to myself and to others actually make a difference to them? Now, this is from one of a spiritual teacher, a great spiritual teacher named Joel Goldsmith. We probably have a couple of copies of this book in our little bookstore. It's one of my absolute favorites, called Practicing the Presence. And what Joel Goldsmith says is the degree of spiritual consciousness which we attain can be measured by the extent to which we relinquish our dependence on the external world of form and place our faith in something greater than ourselves, in the infinite and visible, which can surmount any and every obstacle. It is the awareness, it is an awareness of the grace of God. Right. I need to break that one down a little bit. Yeah. The degree of spiritual consciousness which we attain. Remember that chart I showed you with the levels of awareness? We start at the bottom with despair, with shame and despair, and you move up into grief, and then you go into apathy, and you move to fear and anger and pride, and then you go, when you tip over from pride into courage, is when you step into your power as a human being. And it goes, and it keeps going up from there. It keeps going. You go to joy and peace and enlightenment is at the very top of that scale. So our access to that, our access to moving up on that scale, and most people never move. It's a logarithmic scale. Most people never move but about 5 points from where they come into the world, from where their families and what their society and what they're taught to believe. Most people never move from that. That's why I love this group of people so much, because we are the seekers, right? We're out there looking, reading the spiritual books and working on ourselves and doing the meditative practices and just working to evolve, ourselves and the planet. So what he is saying here is that the degree to which we move on that level of consciousness can be measured by how much we can let go of the world and our dependence on what things look like outside of us. It comes from our understanding of being connected to something greater. Like, I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to know everything I'm going to say. I don't have to know exactly what I'm going to do tomorrow. I don't have to know any of that stuff. All I have to know is that I'm part of something bigger. I have to know that I am part of a power and presence that runs in, around, and through all things, that grows everything outside, that makes the sun shine every day, that the world spins, and I don't have to be in charge of any of that stuff, right? I just have to know that I'm part of something bigger. And my life works better when I realize that. Like, I don't have the control over everything. I don't have to hold the reins over anybody else, what they do, only myself. Only myself. And when I know that I'm that part of that something bigger, oh, it's such a relief. Isn't it? I see. Lily's going, yes, it is. So the degree to which you can let go of the control and the reins and know that you are guided and trust that guidance, that is what moves you up that scale. It's not even a doing. It's not anything that we have to do. It's a being. It's a being. It's being in trust. It's being in faith. It's being at peace.
It's a human being.
It's a human being, right? We're called human beings. We're called human beings. We're not called human doings. We're human beings. So what are you being? What do you be when you walk into a room? Are you shrinking? Are you making yourself small? Or do you shine? Right? Shine your light into the world. Oh, that's our next song. Because everything changes rapidly around us, it's difficult to vision a changeless reality. I need to set this up a little bit better. Okay. So, in the midst of all of this change, there is a constancy. There is a presence that is always here, that always has been, that always will be. Right? It's the presence that created everything. It's what some people call God, some people call the universe, people call energy, creator, whatever. There is that presence that has always been. In the midst of all that change, again, like the calm in the eye of the storm, it's always there, and while everything else is changing within it and around it. That's what this is talking about. And this comes from Ernest Holmes. Because everything changes rapidly around us, it's difficult to vision a changeless reality, which is what we call God, the changeless reality. This intellectual difficulty is met when we realize that change takes place within the changeless. So this changeless constancy we call God, this big container that holds everything, right, that is changeless itself, allows for the change within it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So the ceaseless movement of life is but a necessary complement of that which does not move. So we have the immovable, we have God, that constant thing. Life as us is continually changing. As Donna said so beautifully, I don't know if you said it in the meditation or in your prayer, that we as human beings are the bridge between the material world and the spirit world. That's who we are. We bring spirit into manifestation. That's our job. That's what we do. We're the bridge between both understanding consciousness and living in the material world at the same time. And then he says that there is a center within everyone that doesn't move. So this power that runs in, around, and through all things, that is all constant, that is all knowing, that has always been and always will be, is right here where I stand. It is right there where you sit. It's where each of us is in the midst of all of that change. And I use the picture of the woman looking in the mirror because that was kind of my aha moment. You ever look in the mirror And the awareness that is looking at the reflection is the same awareness that has been there since you were a child. Since you first became aware of being a human being. Yet within that awareness, there's a continual change. Right? You look different than you looked 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. You're going to look different tomorrow. Months from now, the outward form changes, but the awareness that is experiencing the change has always been there. Has always been there. And it is part of the greater changeless entity. I don't know what to call it. The nameless thing, right? That thing that we call God. That part of you that is aware, that is seeing through your eyes, that is experiencing life, that has always been here, is that God self. It is that constancy that is in the midst of the change. Does that make sense? Mind blown, right? I mean, you all are sitting here like so quiet. It is mind blowing, isn't it? Isn't it? And it's slippery too. It's like you grasp it, like, okay, I think I get it, and then it kind of slips away like a fish. You're trying to grab it, and yeah, I think I get it. That analogy for me with the mirror is what did it for me. I hope it helps you.
It's about the divinity within each of us.
It is there is a divinity within each of one of us. Exactly. That is conscious, that is aware, that knows, that is connected with everything else. And that is the truth of our being. That is the part of us that is never hurt. That's the part of us that is changeless. It's the part of us that can't be destroyed. It doesn't matter what is happening around you. It's the part of you that will go on after your body is done doing its work. Right? And it is something that we all share. It is the place where we are all connected. And what we do in a place like this, a center like this, is to do spiritual practice so that we keep reorienting ourselves and remembering that place where we come from. So practicing peace, to practice peace. I've got a little, what do you call it when you do the letters? P-E-A-C-E?
Acronym.
An acronym, there you go. Practicing peace. So to practice peace, number 1, P is for permit yourself to acknowledge that some of your old beliefs about life aren't working. Can anyone do that? Is everybody's life working, right? So allow yourself, just allow yourself. Give yourself the permission to say, some of this stuff isn't working. I know my mom told me that, or my priest, or whoever, but yeah, maybe it's not working. And if you're in pain, that's probably a good indicator, right, that something's not working. The next thing, E, is for explore the possibility that there are things that you don't understand about life, the understanding of which could change everything. Right? I love to think of this as, I think it was a workshop I went to where the person had drew a big circle on the wall, and there was a little tiny sliver, which is like, if the circle is everything there is to be known, what you know would be like this little tiny sliver, right? What you know that you know. Then there's going to be another little piece of the pie that is the things that you know that you don't know. Like, I don't know, you probably don't know rocket science, or know how to cure cancer, or whatever, right? There's all these things that you know you don't know, but you know don't know it. And you know that you could find a book, or you could find a teacher, or you could find something like that to learn it, right? So those 2 little pieces, little teeny tiny slivers of the whole of what there is to know, where paradigm shift is in the stuff that you don't know, you don't know. It's the stuff you don't even know, you don't know it. Which is the huge, huge part of who we are in our lives. This is why we never arrive. We're always a being. We're always a being. So explore the possibility that there are things you just don't know.
Pigs don't know pig stink.
Pigs don't know pig stink. Thanks, hon. A is for affirming your willingness to accept new understanding and awareness. Just be willing. You're already saying, okay, it's possible that I don't know everything there is to know. I'm willing to explore that. And I'm going to accept that there are new understandings and awareness. C is for courageously examining these new understandings and enlarging your belief system to include the ones that align with your values. Like maybe cars weren't so bad, right? This change, whatever this thing might be, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it's going to be a total radical shift. Or maybe it was wrong, yeah. Or let me see, another example. I'm going to move on. And the last thing, express yourself as a demonstration of your highest values. Right? So you want to get aligned. You want to get aligned with understand that you don't know all there is to know. Be open to learning more. Embrace it, and then live from your highest values. Not somebody else's. Maybe that's your paradigm shift. Maybe the values of your family, of your culture, or your whatever don't suit you anymore. Maybe your paradigm shift comes in finding out what's important for you, and following that. That will bring you to that space of peace and practicing peace. And I love using the word practice because, again, it's not like a destination, you get there and you're done. It's a practice.
Like the doctors do.
Like with we practice, right? We practice all the time. And it's about progress, not perfection. Right? So keep in the practice, keep in the prayer, keep in the meditation. Spend time in nature. All of these things are good for practicing peace. Question?
Yeah,
Or
I
comment?
can't believe that there are a lot of things that we don't understand that we're not supposed to understand, and we should stop trying so hard to, am I wrong with that, or did I?
No, I think that's an excellent point. Kara just said that maybe there are some things that we just don't need to know. Some things that are outside of the purview of what it is for us as human beings in the 21st century today. So we let it be. So we let it be. We sit in the calm, in the center of that storm, and let it swirl, and know that what is important for you to know, that you will know.
And you don't have to know everything that everybody else knows.
And you don't have to know everything everybody else knows. Exactly. You have to know what is important for you, and that starts again with living from your values.
We have to
Okay.
let go and let God.
Let go and let God. All right. Is this helpful for anybody?
Yes, very
Yes.
helpful.